Okay. So we're getting everyone, hopefully everyone back. And it will let me screen share now. One of those things you only do once and then you don't have to do again, but unfortunately I had to do it.
But did it work?
Yes, it now lets me screen share. I checked before I started admitting people. This will be the test to see if everyone comes back.
Tom,
Oops, someone's in pain. There was a question happening there, or was that the same person that... You're a bit quiet there, Katie. You need to turn up your volume on your mic. Still very quiet.
I'll switch
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Switch my computer. The presentations in week 5 and 6, do they make up part of an assignment or are they just for kicks?
They're formative, so no, they don't. There's no assignment marks associated with those, but they would be very useful for informing your post, your reflective posts on week 5.
Yeah, sure. I'm just trying to map out my schedule and how much time I've got for things. So I just wanted to know how important. Obviously, we'll do it, but
yeah. So no, there's no assignment marks associated with those, but they are just basically formative.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No worries. 12. Okay, we're missing a couple from the last session.
I have another question about that,
Sure.
Tom. So is the post needs to be related to that week?
No, not necessarily. It needs to be related to the course and your reflections in the course, but not necessarily that week.
Okay, thanks.
And so week 5 is next week, is it?
Yes, this is week 4 now. Yeah, we're racing along.
Yeah, so we'll be doing the week 5 people are presenting next Monday, right?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, good point. So I need to remind everyone that it's coming up in a week's time.
Yeah, it gave me a mini heart attack when I realized.
And what is the idea, Tom? Because I know that using Adobe Spark is to get away from the PowerPoint mentality, but I gotta say my experience is very PowerPointy. So I'm thinking to use Adobe Spark, and
you could use something. You could use PowerPoint, but the key issue I have around PowerPoint is that it's not online. So if you then uploaded your PowerPoint to Google SlideShare, or to to SlideShare, or to Google whatever it's called,
Drive.
No, not Google Drive. To Google Slides, isn't it? Google Slides.
All right. Yeah.
So that it's online, it's viewable, people can follow along. It's less teacher centric as such, because that's the key issue I find around PowerPoint is it lives on your computer as the teacher, and you give access to students to it usually after the class. So it's a lot of it's around control and keeping their attention and stuff. Whereas if you're going to be more student-centered and move towards even student self-direction, then they should be part of that process. And so making your slides, or whatever your delivery mechanism is, available online and synchronous, so that students can go, okay, I'm really interested in this point, or I missed something, I can go back, and that can be live. So that's kind of the issue I have around PowerPoint, is it's so
right. So it's not because I was as I was thinking about mine, I was trying to get away from being too expository. Is that even a word? But being in a way that I would be talking, and that would be slides, and I would be pictures, so I was thinking, do I need to do something more dynamic, use polls? But that's not the point from what I'm getting.
No,
You
not
could
necessarily,
still-
but certainly, you know, the more engaging way that you interact is better for everyone. But yeah, it's just, you know, trying to get people to think a little bit beyond perhaps their comfort zones to
Right. Oh,
experiment
definitely.
and try.
That's definitely doing that.
Yeah.
And there will always be issues, of course, with technology, as we've just learned right now. You know, issues with Zoom being set up the first time on a new computer, which is all very embarrassing for me. But anyway, it happens. But the key there is, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with issues, and learning to problem solve on the fly, and I guess creating an environment where that's not an issue if something goes wrong, you know?
Can I ask a question, Tom, before we move on about
Yeah.
the presentations next week and the week after? Because I'm not really familiar with online sort of delivery. When you're saying it's synchronous, and so, I mean, I've enrolled in Adobe Spark, but I haven't actually tried it yet. But do you drive it, or do people, like, how will it actually happen in the class next week?
So with Spark, it's kind of very much just a PowerPoint alternative, except it's online. And it's much more visual based. So it's slightly different metaphor. So it doesn't really do well with bullet points like PowerPoint does. It has more of a image based, and then text sort of slides over, etc., depending on the template that you choose. And it works really nicely as an app on, say, a tablet like the iPad or Android tablets. But when you're using a new tool, hopefully it actually gets you to sort of think slightly differently as well, which is slightly out of your comfort zone. But because it is online, it's an online presentation, you get that options of being able to share that with your students directly in class, or, you know, before class or whenever.
So that's the bit that I wanted to ask about. So do we send a link to a presentation, and then when we're going through the presentation, do people click through at their own pace, or does the presenter click through and everyone sees it clicking through, or how does that part of it work?
Yeah, so Adobe Spark doesn't necessarily involve users in a more innovative way than, say, PowerPoint would. So it's still a presentation tool. There are other tools that will let you engage live with participants. So, for example, Prezi. So with Prezi, you can either use it as a presentation tool, or you can use it much more interactively. And I've done a couple of remote presentations using Prezi, and people log on and you get a little avatar, and it's like a little icon of who's logged in down the bottom, which is pretty cool. So you can actually see, even though you're perhaps not seeing the audience, you can see who's joined your presentation by avatars, and you can give them the choice of taking control in Prezi. You can't do that in tools like PowerPoint or Spark. So there are ways of making it much more, you know, interactive in the presentation, but yeah, it's you need different tools to do that. So we're kind of pushing the boat out a little bit, but not hugely, by getting you to try to, you know, let go of PowerPoint.
Tom, isn't there a demo Adobe Spark on Flipboard? Didn't you put one up? I have confessed.
That's.
So yes, I was going to look at that.
I have a question, not so much about the tools, but I'm having difficulty imagining how, you know, alternative ways to interact with the students. So it's from the people side. So even if the tool is there and I learned how to use the tool, I can't imagine my students are used to interact in different ways in lectures or in online lectures.
Yeah, so that's another key issue, is when you are wanting to change your pedagogical strategies and approach, you need to make that explicit to your students. So you can't just suddenly, you know, if students are in their first year, it's been very directive, very teacher-centric. You can't suddenly in second year or third year expect them to know how to do problem-based learning, or be much more actively engaged in the learning process, because that's a real cultural change for your students as well. And you know, they know how to pass. They know how to pass from their first year or second year. They know how to do the essay. They know how to do the exam. And suddenly you're asking them to do projects or be actively involved in that learning process and do presentations. And it's like, well, I don't know how to do that. And so there's a huge learning curve. And when you're adding new tools into the learning environment, you've got to learn how to use those tools. And so there's a curve there as well. And so getting to the point where you can use new tools in a more creative way takes time. So you need time to be able to, you know, integrate the use of that tool into your you know, your workflow, your practice. And I guess that's where reflection comes in. But the same is for students and for staff. And so that's when you want to really bring about a significant change in a curriculum or how you teach. And the reason should be driven by, that's what the key graduate outcomes are. That, you know, it shouldn't be just because I want to have a fun and play. It should be about what are you trying, what's the goals for learning for your students, and what are the key capabilities and core skills they need. Bring that back down into first year and start it there. So if you're wanting to use them, get them to use an e-portfolio, get them to start established in the first year. And then by the end of first year, they know how to use that. So if it's WordPress or whatever it is, you know, the tool then becomes a creative tool in second year, because the tool is no longer a barrier. They know how to use it. Second year, they can use that for teamwork and team projects. And third year, it's, you know, if you've got a list of different tools that they've learned over 2 years, then once again, it's more about the creativity and how you use them. So yeah, good question. The key is being explicit to your students. What are you trying to achieve and why, and not expecting them to make the connections themselves, because that's why they're students.
So do you have any suggestions or pointers to where I can find more material on how to train students up for whatever new changes I would like to make? And is it practical to be doing this kind of training or onboarding online?
Yeah, well, I've given you quite a lot of readings, and a lot of those are relevant, and being part of this course. And hopefully, you know, you've got questions like practical questions, ask it of this community as well, because we have, you know, 20 people here of different experiences that can speak into each other's context. So
Tom, would all the students need, if you were going to use Adobe Spark, for example, do all the students need that? And does the university provide a subscription?
I don't think Melbourne does, but no, I choose tools that you can use for free. So there's a free version of Adobe Spark, WordPress, etc., that maybe has a little bit of limitations, but will let you do enough for what you're trying to achieve.
Okay.
So free is always best,
yeah.
Unless the institution has a license. Yeah.
So there is a free version of Adobe Spark, because it's trying to make me pay right now. So, okay, right.
Yep.
I'll do that then. Thank you.
So often a lot of these free tools that we're looking at, the way they make the money is either through advertising, or if you Google, it's by, you know, harvesting your information and selling it to advertisers, or through sort of that freemium model where you get buy-in to a tool and then you like it so much that you will pay for the added extra features or the extra space, or, you know, to be able to do more. And that's kind of how they make the money. So they will tend to put front and center the paid versions, and maybe it's a little bit not quite so obvious to see the free, you know, sign up for free here in some of these, but generally all the tools that I'll be showing you have a free version. Okay, and Lyle is looking very thoughtful there. Don't stick that pencil up your nose. And your microphone is muted.
Many of my colleagues, friends and family would say that's the best setting for my microphone to be on. I don't expect you to answer this because we'll lose rest listen. Can you buy privacy?
It depends on the tool. Depends on the tool.
So I think that's interesting. I think free, yeah. Whereas that's what quickly, and
yeah, I know you had a good,
on the blog.
interesting discussion on.
Yeah. And I'm not sure you can. Yeah, you can buy extra features and better facilities, or you can. Yeah, but yeah, I don't think you can buy privacy. I think
Yeah, I'm not sure because I think I guess that's partly why I'm a bit of an Apple fan. Is that you know, a big ethos of Apple is that it's your privacy, it's your data, and so you know that's kind of built into their products. Whereas for Google and Facebook, it's not. It's completely the opposite. So
yeah,
you make your choices based on what's important to you.
Well, I think Google, Facebook, and Amazon are the real killers, aren't they? So keep away from them, and you're probably off to a good start. Okay,
let's go into screen sharing. Hopefully it works, and have a quick overlook. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
Excellent. Just try to bring up the chat window so I can see that at the same time, because it closes all those windows when you go to screen share. Anyway, so this is the course on Canvas. Is this the first time for anyone using Canvas? I mean, it's pretty new to Melbourne, Canvas. I can't sort of see any nods or anything there, but having used a fair number of other learning management tools myself in the past, I'm finding Canvas actually not too bad. Every tool will have its own issues and will do certain things better than others, but the Canvas, as far as a learning management system, is actually pretty good. So just for those who are new, we have a subject overview, and this is probably a good place to quickly have a look at where we're heading and what we've done, particularly as you're going to need to catch up. And there's links here to the various activities over each week. We have a collaborative Google map, which about half of us have put themselves on so far. Just gives us a little bit of a geographical context of where people are from or where they associate themselves with. Quite interesting to see, you know, all the different backgrounds that people bring to the University of Melbourne. It's really quite interesting. Quite a global background of the community. We have our shared Flipboard magazine, which is one way of trying to bring together all of your portfolios, because what we're doing for your portfolios is it's your e-portfolio. It's not mine. It's not housed within Canvas. It's your e-portfolio that you're establishing on WordPress, and then you're inviting the rest of the course, the class, this community into that. So you need to share those links to those. So Flipboard is one way that we've done that. It's not perfect, but we seem to be slowly getting people on board with that and getting them there. Loving Brian's screenshot there, the angry Brian. He looks angry, but he's not. It's just how the camera caught his in progress video. So that's one of the key tools. We have a Twitter hashtag for the course. So if you're on Twitter or you want to explore Twitter, then we have a hashtag, #EDUC90970. And using the hashtag, we can search for interaction and comment. You can see there's a few of us there, not a whole lot yet. Still waiting for Lyle to activate, you know, get on Twitter.
Oh, yes.
And share his content, you know. Start broadening those horizons. What other tools are we using? We've done a Survey Monkey, so we've got the first Survey Monkey results there if you want to have a look and see what people have said. And it's well over 100 responses there. So I've done this in various workshops and various groups. So it kind of makes it interesting. We have analysis tool for Twitter called Tags Explorer. Kind of creates like this Death Star sort of look, where each of these nodes is a particular user, and you can look at their activity and get an idea of conversation. So at the moment, it's pretty much me and Paul are tweeting together. So it would be great to get some other people active on Twitter as well. And we can look at top conversationalists, which is myself and Paula, and then the rest of the class kind of drops off very rapidly there. We have our survey from last week. I'll come back to that shortly. We have our collaborative Mendeley annotated library. So Mendeley is a reference managing tool, but it's also an online community, research community. So you've all been invited to this. Check your email to see if your invite has come through or got lost, or if it's gone into spam folder, or if you need a different email address than your student Uni Melbourne address, if you already have a Mendeley account. So you can see we've got 11 people that have joined this collaborative Mendeley account so far. That leaves about another 10 that are in process. So what I quite like about this Mendeley group is that we can share documents. And as people find interesting articles, they can share them here. You've all been invited as contributors. And you can maybe sort of say something about the article as well. So just a little bit of a sentence sort of saying, how is it relevant? What did you think about it? What are some of the issues? And if you find the full PDF, you can share that as well. So that's our Mendeley group. So we do want to embed what we're doing here in scholarship. We want it to be informed by the literature. We want it to be, scholarly informed, and this is one way to help achieve that. When you're making your posts on your WordPress blogs, your reflective posts, we do want those to be scholarly and to use APA formatting for the referencing as well. Having said that, I still want them to be reflective, and I do note that a couple of the posts were perhaps a little bit more like literature reviews than reflection. So I'd like you to sort of think through, how does this apply to me? What are you learning that's relevant to your context? Or what are some of the issues in being able to contextualize it to your own context? So that's kind of where we've got to so far. Let's have a quick look at the survey from last week. So once again, there's more than this class that have responded, but I think it's quite useful to have a look. And so we have a range of expertise in research, from just starting research right up to being heavily involved in research. So we've got quite a range of experience. What types of research publications? Generally, the journals are the highest because you get the highest impact factor from that. And particularly at the University of Melbourne, I would think that's probably significantly higher than the average as well. Book chapters give you a little bit more scope to discuss ideas and flesh them out a bit more, but they don't get as much impact factor, unfortunately. Conference proceedings, a great way to knock out ideas, to start an idea, get some critical peer feedback, and you might want to then work that up into a full journal article. Conference abstracts. I think increasingly concise papers or abstracts for conferences is a good way to get some critical feedback, peer feedback on an idea without basically throwing away all of what could have been a really good journal article by doing a full paper in a conference and then not being able to, you have to rework that as a journal article. And then obviously we've got some practice space people around artworks, etc. And a few people get engaging in blog posts. Probably a few more after this course, hopefully. What sort of social networks do people utilize to publicize your research? This is where Twitter comes in, Lyle. It's a great way of really amplifying your research and getting people to read your research in a global community. So even if that's just one advantage of using Twitter, I think it's quite significant. If you're wanting to increase your impact factor from your research perspective, then people need to know that you've researched, that you've published stuff, and they need to read it before they're going to cite it. So that's where these social network tools actually can have a positive effect upon your impact factor, by driving those conversations, pointing people to your research, and altmetrics tracks, particularly these ones that I've highlighted here. Alternative metrics gives you basically an impact factor based on conversations on Twitter, Facebook, Mendeley. So you can see there's a bit of a theme here as to why the tools that I've chosen. I specifically don't choose Facebook because I see that as a social place and I don't want to invade that. Google Plus, I should probably take that off now because it's dead. Pinterest, interesting there's none there because Pinterest really seems to have taken off, particularly in the arts community. YouTube, so maybe you've done an interview about an article that you published in your research, and if you put into the metadata the description of your YouTube video, the DOI of that article, then that will get tracked for alt metrics, Reddit, and there's a few other sources there as well. What research social networks do you have profiles on? So once again, these are the ones I'm trying to get you to engage with as well. We haven't looked at academia.edu as part of this course. We are looking at ResearchGate and Mendeley. ResearchGate really seems to have taken off. There are some other ones, and you can check out some of those in responses. They just don't tend to be quite as popular. Do you have an online portfolio? Well, this kind of changes a bit as you're doing a course like this because that's where WordPress starts pulling up because you've used it, etc. There are other platforms. LinkedIn's very popular. If you're into graphics design, then Behance is probably very popular. If you're using institutional ePortfolio, Mahara is usually the default one. Canvas has its own built-in one. What sort of research IDs have you claimed? Well, you probably all got ORC ID because basically all universities now require you to have one and to put it into your profile, and most journals do as well. You will have a researcher ID if you've published anything in the Web of Science database. It's just that not many people go in there and actually claim that ID. So basically these tools you need to teach. You need to teach them who you are and line them up with the articles that are in the databases. Google Scholar, very popular. And there are some other ones, alternatives. Do you use an online bibliographic tool? I did specify online there because that's how you're going to be able to share it easier than just emailing, say, EndNote files. So there's my EndNote, there's Mendeley, Zotero. RefMe is another alternative. What sort of research domains? Well, most people really sort of focus on their discipline context. So if you're, say, a product designer, you might research around plastics design, etc. Increasingly, there's more people as well interested in the scholarship of teaching and learning and using that as a research pathway, which is obviously one that we're really keen to recommend to you as a parallel pathway for your research. Research your teaching practice. These are kind of interesting, the last two questions. It's more around people's opinions. Which of the following research measures do you consider to be the most important? Impact factor usually comes out the highest. Citation counts are kind of basically how you build your impact factor. H-index is kind of like a average of your citation counts over 5 years or 10 years. And alt metrics is starting to sort of grow, which is around the alternative metrics, which is around those social networks. ResearchGate has its own metrics, but WordPress, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Mendeley, they all feed into alt metrics. And the way they feed in is if you make a mention of your research and you've posted it on Mendeley or Twitter or done a YouTube video about it, is, as I say, if you've got in that tweet, in that Mendeley metadata, in your YouTube metadata, the DOI, the digital object identifier of your article, which is a digital link that does not change, then that will get tracked through metrics. So that's the key, is putting the DOI into those mentions. Last question. What forms of mentoring and scholarship for teaching technology enhanced learning would you find beneficial? I quite like the fact that community practice comes up top. Another one that's really good is co-authoring. I guess that's kind of around mentoring. Workshops come up relatively high, but I think that's partly just because of what people are used to. And I do run a couple of CMOOCs, so I'm interested to see what people think about CMOOCs as well. So there we go. That was the survey. I know there's a few of you yet to complete that survey. So if you'd like to do that, feel free to do that. There's no sort of end date for that. So looking at today, what are we looking at today? I'm just going to skip over to the iPad because the iPad looks quite nice with the way it formats it. So we're looking at ResearchGate and your second ePortfolio post, which was due this week, we've rescheduled to end of next week. So you've got another week to work on that. Everyone's really happy about it, I'm sure. And looking at design-based research. So sometimes this is called educational design research. It's pretty much a synonym. Effectively design-based research as methodology. And when you're contextualizing that to education, Tom Reeves in particular calls it educational design research. But effectively it's design-based research. It's a great methodology for looking at how can you critically explore your own practice. How can you get critical feedback? How can you go about designing a curriculum differently? How can you evaluate what you're doing and then contribute to the wider literature? So I have put a few of key references there. One of the latest ones from Tom Reeves, you can see is that second one. So this is published by one or two of his PhD students, creating a good clinical practices inspection. It's really quite a nice article on redesigning a clinical training exercise that was done face-to-face as an online alternative, particularly within the COVID-19 crisis. So a lot of the key seminal work here is from Tom Reeves, and you can see a lot of these articles reference him. Susan McKinney is kind of like one of his proteges, so you can see her name features in these references as well. And she has become one of the leading names in design-based research in education now as well. And I'll throw in one of my own examples in there just to show you how I've applied it. So what is design-based research? Well, this comes from McKinney and Reeves in 2012. They've done an updated version, 2019, version 2 of this book. This gives you a very quick sort of overview of the 4 phases of design-based research. You start with basically a look review. What have people done? What is out there? What's published on this? You analyze what are you trying to achieve? Is there a particular learning problem that your students struggle with? Is there a graduate outcome that you're trying to actually build into the curriculum that is not very well achieved at this point? So what are you trying to do? So start with that sort of analysis, exploration of what's been written about this before, what can you learn from the literature, and from that you identify some initial design principles, and design principles are some keys around how you would approach that. And it might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 design principles that the literature says are key in that particular context. And then the second stage is basically designing a prototype, going about how would I, based on what I've discovered from the literature and the design principles I've identified, how would I then go about designing something to achieve what I'm trying to do here? And you make a rapid prototype. So you can sort of see how this lines up with assignment 2 and 3. The third phase is getting some evaluation. So it's actually rolling that out with your students or with a group, getting them to give you critical feedback on that, reflecting on that feedback, and that becoming an iterative loop of redesign, reevaluation, and that might take 2 or 3 iterations before you're happy with the outcome. And then the final stage is really sort of sharing that, sharing what you've learnt, sharing how you've redefined the initial design principles that you might have identified, how you may have come up with some new design principles for that particular context. Maybe there aren't any that existed already, or there are some specific things that really were critical to the design of that activity or that curriculum that you came up with that are new, that you want to then share, and you do that through publishing, etc. You can sort of see in this diagram that there are little arrows at each phase. So effectively, because this is a 4-stage or 4-phase methodology, each of those can have a publishable output. You can publish about your literature review, your analysis of the problem. You can publish around your prototype design and the actual how you're going about that design process, and you can publish about the evaluation. So you can actually have two forms of publication from a design-based research methodology before you even get any user data. And so those first 2 you don't have to get ethics consent for, because you're not involving participants. It's your literature review, it's your own thoughts or your co-designers around that design process. And then it's the 3rd stage that starts involving students or users or participants, and that's where you need to get ethics consent if you're wanting to publish from that. Okay. So as far as an effective process goes for getting reflection and getting impact, is, you know, from research outputs, it's a great methodology to use. Some examples. Once again, I've put that latest one from Reeves and his PhD students. It's a really nice article. Have a read of it. What I like is he's based that, well, the students have based it on 3 very simple design principles. What did they identify from previous research and studies around how they could put a clinical practice workshop online? And the goal was to make it more accessible and to be able to get more people to be able to do that, rather than one physical workshop, which could only cater for 15 to 20 people per year, which in this case, in the COVID-19 crisis, we need to train a whole lot more people to do vaccinations quickly. And doing that online is one way to do that, but we obviously still want it to be very rigorous. So the design principles they came up with how to do this, effectively using virtual reality. First design principles, rather than perfectly duplicate, replicate where possible, and innovate where necessary. So you can see these design principles aren't necessarily hugely detailed or involved. It's about being very pragmatic, being very practical. And how does this then lead into the design of your artifacts, your curriculum, your intervention, whatever it is that you're trying to actually design. I like the 3rd one from a virtual reality perspective, because I do a lot of work in that field. Design principle 3, the fidelity of the simulated experiential learning environment does not have to be exceptionally high, as long as it enables learners to suspend disbelief and feel that they're actually experiencing what is real. That for me is a key around cost factors. Do we have to spend millions of dollars designing virtual reality environments for learning? Well, no, we don't. We can do this much more lower key, as long as they're authentic and they make the users feel that they're actually in that environment. It doesn't have to be super high fidelity. And that's kind of like, for me, like a liberating design principle. You don't have to employ computer programmers. You could do this sort of stuff very simply using simple tools like SeekBeak. And we've done that in a number of projects. So as examples for that, I've just got a couple of projects I've worked on. One around mobile mixed reality and paramedic education, and we use SeekBeak, which is a web-based platform, to do that. And a presentation I did at Ed Media, I put that there mainly because it kind of summarizes a lot of the concepts that we've been looking at in this course. So if I just go and have a quick look at that. And that wasn't the link that I wanted. That's right, it's in, got a whole lot of windows open here. Find the right window. I would have had this all queued up if my computer hadn't played up, but anyway. Right, so I might have to check those links because it should link to this presentation, and I think I've linked to the actual paper instead of the presentation, which is not what I wanted to do. So with this presentation here, I'm looking at the idea of the scholarship of teaching technology enhanced learning and how I've approached that using design-based research. And you can see there's an ecology of resources diagram there as well. So it just kind of starts to bring together a lot of the threads that we've been looking at. And I think it's maybe a useful article for you to have a look at if you're trying to make the links between all these elements. So I will check that link to make sure it's pointing to that actual presentation rather than the full paper. But I think I've got in the full paper all those elements as well.
What is it that you said, Tom? A SeekBeak?
SeekBeak. S-E-E. Well, let me just pull that right up on the screen. We are actually going to be looking at this in about week 7 or 8, I think. That's annoying, it's getting in the way. Seekbeak.com. It's spelled just how it sounds, SEEKBEAK.com, and you can register for free. So I won't go into it too much. Well, I won't go into it today because I want to spend an actual session on exploring immersive reality in teaching and learning, and I'll get you to have a bit of a play of SeekBeak during that week. Okay, so that's kind of where we're heading today. The other thing that I wanted to get us to look at was our ResearchGate community. So if I click on the link here, it'll take us there. So if you don't have a ResearchGate account already, I recommend that you set one up. I find it quite valuable as a way of getting my research out there, getting people to read it. And once again, that is going to, if you're about traditional impact factors, that will drive your impact factor, because people are not going to cite you until they've read your work. So you want to get people to read what you've published. Okay, this is one way to help do that. ResearchGate also allows you to share publications that have copyright over them. So you can't share, a journal article that you've signed the intellectual property and copyright to a journal to publicly, but you can on ResearchGate provide an abstract and overview, and you can privately share those research articles. So you can have a private full text version that people then request to download, and that's done on an individual basis. but you can't publicly share something that you've signed the copyright across to. So that's another pitch for publishing in open access. So I try to publish as much as I can in open access journals so that that's not an issue. And then you can share the full version without any problems, depending on the copyright. So what ResearchGate allows you to do is actually create projects and research groups. And I'd like to establish a project, a ResearchGate project around this course so that we can perhaps start sharing anything that we're publishing around this and into this project group. If you're on ResearchGate, you can search for #EDUC909 or use that link, it'll take you here, that's in the canvas, and then ask to join, and I'll get an email and then I'll authenticate you.
Hello, Tom.
Yes?
How useful is ResearchGate for teaching?
For teaching, well, I use it quite a lot for the projects that I'm working on. Most of my projects are about innovation in teaching and learning. So it's a great tool for me for teaching the lecturers that I work with, and my work is with lecturers, not with students directly, but how you then use that with students, maybe you're trying to get them into thinking about research in a particular domain, and this might be one tool to help you do that. So what I do is I set up projects on ResearchGate for, at least recently, you know, I've only used it for the last few years, around significant projects, and I can invite my co-researchers into that, my colleagues, and we can use this to curate the work that we've done. So here's an example here, the Mesh 360 project. Involves, as you can see, about 13 collaborators, and we're all exploring how immersive reality can be used in education in various contexts. So the project log allows us to, whenever we've published something, add it to that project, and it just kind of drives the conversation. Once again, it drives impact factors because people are interested in reading about what you're doing, and it just provides a bit of a hub, a one-stop place to find stuff that you've done around that particular project. So I guess the issue I tend to have is, because I have all these projects all over the place, is how do I point people to what we've done rather than, you know, hundreds of emails or hundreds of articles, and having a hub, having somewhere to curate that actually becomes important. And so this is one way to do that. Does that kind of make sense? Well, I think, was that Patrick?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
So once again, I guess I'm sort of pointing you towards some tools, and how you use them may be different to how I use them. It depends on your context, but have a try at them. And in the context of this course, really keen for everyone to become part of this EDUC 90970 ResearchGate project.
Is this a new subject? Like, will you be adding to this page with ongoing students, or is it just for this cohort, or how are you envisaging that works?
I'm envisioning that it would be continuing and ongoing. The course itself is not new. I'm new to facilitating it, and how I'm facilitating it is obviously different to the prior facilitator.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that'll be something that we can build on. And if you look at the course overview, so I'll jump back to Canvas subject overview, you can sort of see this might become important after the course, because one of the things I'm keen on doing is working with anyone from this group who is wanting to continue working in different ways. And so you can see I've sort of said at the end of the course, you're welcome to join a CMOOC that I run around professional accreditation around the Certified Member Association for Learning Technology, and also to join the SOTEL research group, which you might have seen the call go out from CSHE. And that would build into things like Mendeley Library, the ResearchGate, etc. So I see those as activities, projects, etc., which would go beyond the course. But at this point, the tools for us to explore in this community of inquiry and see, how can we use these?
Can I ask another question then about ResearchGate and creating kind of groups or project hubs? If we were to do that, I'm just thinking for other research projects, do you just kind of set one up and invite people, or wait for people to discover it? Like, how does it?
Generally, I invite people.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally I'm interested in specific people. I do make most of my projects, the content, the documentation, etc., public, but I generally make it contributed by a specific invited group. So for me, it's a way of, the ResearchGate, Mendeley, etc., the Twitter hashtags, etc. It's a way of showing that activity, that we're actually doing stuff that's significant, there's impact, but making sure that it's private as far as who can contribute to that. Twitter's slightly different because anyone can use a hashtag, but the ResearchGate community, etc., is by invitation.
So you've created that Educ project group, and then people ask to join it, and you approve them. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Or you invite them? Yeah.
So it can go either way. And I may or may not, if people randomly from outside the course or outside the context of whatever the project is, allow them to become part of it. Probably not the course, but other projects. And that can be serendipitous. It could be someone who's really, invested in that particular topic or that research, and suddenly we build a collaboration out of that. And that's the benefit of it being public, is that people can see it, they can find it. And certainly a lot of my online collaborative projects have come about that way, where someone has seen online the work I've done, or they've seen it presented at a conference. They want to get on board, they're doing something similar, they want to share ideas, and there's an email conversation, and we start collaborating. So there we go, quick lightning overview of design-based research and week 4 and where we're heading from there. So next week is your presentations. I'm just going to jump back to screen sharing. You're all very quiet today, even Lyle.
There's still time, Tom.
yeah. I'm waiting for the one more thing. Anyway, so under modules, down to, we're in week 4, but next week is learning theories, outlines the learning theories, and week 6 is outline the design frameworks. And this is where I really want you, the community, to be having a voice rather than me talking all the time. And so we have pretty much all the topics have someone have put themselves in. A couple of collaborations, great. Brooke and Katie want to do social constructivism. No one on constructionism at this point, but also I'm happy there's a spare slot there if someone wants to do something else, to suggest I want to do something else that's not in that list, then you have edit rights to that page. As a student, that page is editable by you. You can jump in there and change that topic if you want to and put your name by it. What I don't want you to do is jump in and change what someone else has done and overwrite them. But if there's a topic there that you really want to work with someone else, but someone's got it ready, you might want to email them and say, hey, Rebecca, I'd really like to work on the pedagogy, andragogy, hudagogy continuum with you, and let's do it together. So have an email or a discussion forum, conversation around that. So those are the next 2 weeks, which is really going to be about you guys presenting. The presentation link field here is the presentation tool that you use. So I'd really like it to be online so that you can share that, not just a PowerPoint file that you have to email. Once you've done your presentation, or if you want to, if you've got it ready beforehand, pop the link into there so that we can all have a look at it and that's basically your notes. What I want you to do is basically present live using Zoom, and I'll give you all co-hosting rights to screen share or whatever you want to do. Okay, enough of me talking. Any burning questions or anything?
So I'm looking at the 4-stage diagram with the implementation and spread. I've opened up the PDF from your presentation, but it's just got a bit more detail than the one that appears on the Canvas page. Seen a lot of diagrams that have 4 boxes or 4 circles, either in a row like this, or at the 4 points of the compass. And then clockwise, an arrow goes from the top box, which is idea, and down to sort of prototype and implementation. And then at the bottom, you have evaluation, and then the arrow goes back up to the top. And then you iterate the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the things that the students of my subjects, and particularly subjects in the Master Public Health, they said, well, this is all just, it was really entertaining, this is all just common sense. So I wanted to throw the common sense question out there and ask, what's unique about design to educational research? Is it the tools? I'm thinking that the tools at each stage might be unique, or something at the end. I really get the scholarship of teaching and learning, like that's a cracker. No one had thought of applying scholarship to teaching and learning until Boyer came along, who I heard about last week. So is there a similar sort of thing here that sort of experimental design had never been applied to education until these guys like Reeves came along? Is that right?
Well, yeah, it's, I guess, it's what we're doing with, well, what Reeves is doing with design-based research is taking pre-existing methodology and applying it to education, and then modifying it for the particular context of education and curriculum design in particular. So Diana Laurillard has written quite significantly about how curriculum design should be a collaborative process rather than just an individual process. That should be viewed as a design process, not as, you know, just make it up off the top of your head. So we should actually think quite critically and have a structured methodology when we're coming to look at curriculum design and assessment design, rather than I was taught this way and therefore I'm going to teach my students that way as well because that's all I know, and that means they're all going to get an exam and an essay. So it's trying to sort of give people a structured methodology to get, you know, go further with curriculum design and think about it more critically. But it is borrowing from a design framework. It's not something that Reeves invented.
Yeah, so I'm probably thinking of design rather narrowly in terms of sort of experimental design or evaluation of interventions.
Yeah, so what
probably
he,
need
what
to
he really
read some of the stuff. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, what's critical with Reeves is, I mean, he's retired. He's an emeritus professor now, so he's, you know, in his 80s. He's been around a long time. So he looked at, when he was, you know, younger and starting teaching, the whole idea of having control groups, and how do we know if we're improving teaching and learning practice when we have a control group. So we have one group doing, you know, students doing it the traditional way, and then we have the group of students doing it the new way, and we compare learning outcomes and seeing if the control group ends up, you know, with more higher test scores or not, etc. And so that kind of really comes out of a lot of it comes out of the health disciplines and the randomized control trials. But it doesn't really make sense in teaching and learning, because teaching and learning is messy. There's a whole lot of factors that are involved there, and you need to rethink that process. And you also start limiting yourself when you have a control group, because if you've got a control group, then that limits what you can do with the innovation, because you have to basically map to the same outcomes in your innovation, but all you're doing is using different tools. And so Reeve's looking at the literature, and if you look at the literature in education, you have all these case studies of new technologies that basically show no significant difference in outcomes. And so he sort of said, well, what's going on here? Why are we, we're not actually seem to be improving teaching and learning with technology, and why not? And the issue is because we're limiting ourselves by having a traditional experimental approach to curriculum design, which means that we're not actually doing anything different pedagogically. All we're doing is using different tools. And so there will not be any significant difference in learning. How can there be? We're not actually doing anything pedagogically different. All we're doing is using an iPad or a computer or a whiteboard or whatever the technology is. So to get away from that is not, let's not look at being able to replicate this in two different modes. Let's start with analysis of what are we trying to achieve. Let's design what we think should be, how we could achieve that. So it gives us freedom to be able to design that. And then let's evaluate that and see what the learning impact is. And so it also gives you freedom in the choice of tools. So you go, what is the appropriate tool to achieve the goal that I'm trying to achieve that I've identified through the analysis? Is Twitter the appropriate tool to use for that? It may not be, etc. So
you mentioned something really important. The outcome, you might be measuring the wrong outcome, in the sense that if you're measuring an outcome that can be achieved traditionally, then anything that you can achieve only with new technology like connectivity or reflective posts or something, if you're not assessing that, then if you don't measure new things. We see this in health and medicine a lot, although we concentrate a lot on the precision of the intervention, because the outcomes in many RCTs are sort of clear, whereas the interventions often aren't. So that
kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Have
a read of his papers. They're really
we'll do.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Looking forward to your fantastic insights over the next couple of weeks. That'll be fun.
Super. Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for your time. Great to catch up with you all, and don't forget to keep blogging and commenting. There was a lot of interaction on your blogs over the last week, unsurprisingly. But I was really pleased to see the depth of that and some of the reflections that were going on. That was great. So keep that up.
Thank you.
Okay. See you all.
See you, Tom.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.